Welcome back to ManaTutor MTG Draft. Today we're going to be going over some of the changes that have happened since the start of playing Lord of the Rings Draft. We'll be going over some strategy. We actually just came back from a draft that was live at our local gaming store. We only got 6 people in the draft, but it was a fun time.
Well, it's good.
And one of us won.
Yeah, I mean, I did not expect it, but I will gladly take the win. It was definitely fun. Drafted red white and went wide humans mostly. I was concerned I didn't draft enough removal, but it turns out if you're fast enough on the play and you just continually smack people with creatures, you may not need as much removal. So
Yeah. Your deck looked good from what I could see of it. I drafted black-red amass and got a little mana screwed one time, and then got a little flooded the next. Played 16 lands plus a land cycler, so I think it's kind of variance, but went 1 and 2. But happy that you won it, and we actually opened up some set boosters that you won as a prize. And I'll put some of that on this channel. I'll put some of that on my other channel, core channel, ManaTutor MTG. So if you want to see those set booster openings, subscribe.
Like and subscribe.
Like this, and we will be opening those on camera. So as for changes since the start of this, well, first of all, we should probably mention you're in town today, obviously.
Yeah, so different format than previously. We are actually in the same location, which will be the exception, not the rule, but glad to be here. We may get one more in before I leave town, but this is gonna be a good one.
Yeah. So I live in Michigan, Matt's in DC, so, but we grew up, I think we mentioned we grew up playing Magic together back in middle school and high school, so, longtime friends, and he had a chance to come back home, so decided to take advantage of it and shoot an episode this way. Hopefully the sound quality and everything is good, but I think the content will be awesome, so.
Looking forward. Let's dive in.
All right, so first up we want to talk about the speed of the format. So while I do think the data shows the format is quick, we saw this earlier. I'll remind the audience by pulling up the analytics. We had the play draw advantage. When you filter this for Premier Draft and look at the speed of the format, you see it's pretty quick. This is your win rate by being on the play versus the draw, and that average number of turns. So it's a small average number of turns. It's in the group, so it's not an outlier like Farx LB1.
Yeah.
But it is still quick. I haven't felt that it being that quick. I do think you need to get on board fast, but in general, it feels like a lot of games are winning by going slightly bigger than your opponent.
Yeah.
So I just kind of want to mention that. I have been liking mid-range decks and control decks quite a bit.
Yeah.
How do you feel?
Yeah, I agree. I'll actually note, on the graph, right, since we talked about it a couple of weeks ago now, it's actually slowed down, right? It was around 8.6-ish, and now it's around a little over, around 8.7. So, I mean, not a huge change, right, in terms of average number of turns, but it is a notable shift on there. And I do think as people start playing, as sort of the metagame evolves a little bit, you're going to see maybe that slowdown as people start to, move away from just aggro beatdown to something that a little bit more control-ish, things like that. But yeah, I agree. I think getting on the board early is definitely important. I mean, our in-person draft today kind of validated that experience for me, drafting heavy aggro, turn 2 Mary into turn 3 Rally at the Hornburg, and I'm swinging into turn 4 Flowering of the White Tree, and I'm swinging for 10 on turn 4. I mean, it adds up, right? And so I would say, getting on board quick, still good. But I do think there has been a little bit of a slowdown, and I think we can talk a little bit about maybe how some of that looked.
I think one thing that helps some of these decks go a little bit longer is if you can deal with the decks that come out quickly, like the red-white. I mean, you just won with one. But if I imagine you've got a decent number of 1/1s out there with some Rally at the Hornburg and things like that. Yeah. I have found, which I did not think going into this, that a copy of the Black Breath, or which is black and 2 creatures get -1. All your opponent's creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn. That is usually not a card you want to play in limited, but there have been enough 1/1s around that I have felt like playing a copy in my black decks to be pretty good. The problem is when it ends up being a blank, if you're not playing against 1/1s.
Yeah.
But I think the Ring Tempts You helps you loot that out.
Yeah.
So cards that can be really good situationally, but you have a means to get rid of it and replace it, are better in this set than they have been in other sets.
Yeah, no, and absolutely, and this is funny because I saw a couple of copies of the Black Breath floating around in our draft pod.
Yeah.
And I would bet you might have taken one of them because you were playing black. But,
I did not actually. I think I just saw better cards over that at the time I saw it, but yeah.
But yeah, no, I noticed a couple, and I was thinking in the back of my head, man, this could really screw me if somebody takes this and plays it against me.
Yeah.
I didn't counter draft it or anything, but like, you know, I knew I was probably by mid first pack going red white, and I was like, well, this is somewhat concerning. So I saw at least 2 copies floating around.
Yeah.
Never got played against me, but yeah, I agree. I do agree. I also agree. I think it's a little situational, but it'll come down to, you know, like you said, maybe being able to loot it away, or there are also, like, if you're playing red black, there's the one that Quarrel's End, right? You discard to draw 2, right? And so you could get rid of it to draw 2. There's other ways you could potentially get rid of it in your hand depending on the colors you're playing and cards you're playing. But yeah, it's I would agree that it might be good in all black decks as a single one-off, just as sort of a precaution to insulate you, especially in the best of 1 format, right? In the best of 3, I would obviously sideboard it, but in a premier draft format for sure.
So that it's interesting. I actually do not, and I don't think it's right to change up what your starting deck will be, like just because you're playing best of 1.
Yeah.
So, but it's I think a higher pick in best of 3 because of the sideboard capability. But I would still pick my first copy of it in best of 1, not highly, but I whereas before I avoided it as an unplayable, I now actively do like 1 in my deck.
Yeah, that's fair.
Kind of similar, although I haven't played 1 yet. I think I have the same theory about the 2 mana red one that does 1 damage to 2 things.
Yeah.
For the same type of reason. And that one helps to be a little less situational if you're facing some artifact that you need to blow up.
Yes. Yeah.
As that as
and
well.
There are, as we've established, some really good artifacts in Anduril, Palantir Vorthanc, things like that. And so, you know, being able to have that as a secondary effect of it while still getting some use out of it in your deck is pretty good.
I've also really liked, so this past week, playing Torment of Golem on turn 4. It's just so nice to both get some board presence, like get a 2/2 out there with the Amass, or get basically 2/2 Amass with haste almost if you already have an Amass creature out there, and also steal whatever your opponent wants to play the very next turn. I've really liked cracking this on turn 4.
Sure, yeah, and 100% agree. It's great because, you know, whether you're on the play or the draw, right, your opponent's going to be going into their 5th turn. There's a lot of really good 5-drops. There's a lot of really good 6-drops. And if they had it in their opening hand and they kept the hand for that reason, or partly for that reason, you just being able to smack that out of their hand. It's not always going to win you games, but it's going to definitely hurt your opponent usually. And, you know, obviously if you draw it later in the game, it could be something you loot away if your opponent is playing no hand at that point or something like that. But, you know, to your point about the Amass, man, I've had situations, turn 2 Mortar Muster, turn 3 Dunlin Crebain, turn 4, you know, Torment of Golem, right? So at that point you're, you know, hey, 5/5 Orc Army that's also hitting somebody at that point on turn 4. So that's not always going to happen, but, you know, when you ramp like that with the army, and your opponent doesn't necessarily have an answer, it's especially great when you take their removal, right? You take their removal, and you now have a 5/5 Orc Army that's going to hit them in the face. So, you know, I definitely think it's a good card, and it's gone up a lot in my estimation. Yeah. So, in terms of the speed, this kind of goes to the discussion we were having. I've actually found myself, when I'm playing somewhat of a control strategy, that I have on occasion intentionally slowed myself down a little bit to be able to keep, particularly with blue, a counter in hand or a removal spell in hand for what I'm expecting my opponent might play on turn 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Because there are so many good 2-drops and 3-drops that are, legendary creatures, and sometimes when they're played, they can be game changing. And if you don't save that mana, I mean, if I have a really good play that I want to play, or if I'm trying to be aggro, obviously I'll do it. But there's a lot of times where I'll save for the Glorious Gale, or I'll save for the Saruman's Trickery, and just let them kind of play whatever they want, and just immediately remove it before it even not remove it. I'll counter it. But things like Arwen, Samwise Gamgee, not the 1-cost Frodo, but the 2-cost Frodo, Bilbo, the uncommon version of Elrond, those kind of things, they start off people's engines, and if you can stop them from even hitting the board, you can just basically take out someone's strategy and kneecap them on turn 2.
Right.
And so I don't always do this, but it's definitely something I think about now more than I did originally. Like, even if I've got a Mordor Muster, right, and I've got a Glorious Gale, I might save the Mordor Muster, and if I'm expecting, like, if I'm seeing based on the colors they're playing or something like that, that I might be expecting a turn 2 or 3 legendary to hit, I might just let them do it and walk right into the counter.
Yeah, it's interesting that, like, so blue decks are one that I have not had an opportunity to draft as much, but I think it's probably the most underdrafted color right now compared to its power.
It certainly wasn't our
physical
draft, right?
Nobody drafted blue, or one
with
person.
Like six cards left, and it comes to me, and 4 of them are blue.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I contemplated pivoting into black-blue end of pack 2, and then I saw Smite the Deathless at one point pretty late, and I'm like, okay, I already have a lot of good red cards. I'm gonna stick with red-black. But
You're welcome. I passed it.
Yeah, I probably should have actually jumped into blue, but blue it has a lot of different ways of playing, but I think the most blue decks would prefer to be a control-based deck with the good amount of counter magic, as well as some cards that slow down the early aggression, with like Pelgear Survivor's a great blocker, and a ramper. And with all the card draw that there is in blue as well, like, it just survive, draw, and then attrition your opponent. So
yeah, for sure, yeah, and so that's the thing that I've kind of found, and I don't know if that's something that's impacting the game as a whole, but I mean, obviously we're seeing just a slight slowdown in the play, so I think people may be kind of starting to think about that more, and it's certainly something I found myself thinking against. If my opponent's got an island and any other card out, and they don't have a 2-drop, I'm expecting the counter. At this point, I'm expecting the Glorious Gale, and I'll often play around it. Like, I'll play a Mordor Muster or something instead of playing a creature, just to walk around the Glorious Gale, because they can only hold it for so long. And so or like even if I'm playing red white, right, I'll play a Rally at the Hornburg versus playing a 2-drop creature or something like that. Just to get around the counter. So it's something I found on both sides, contemplating holding that mana open, and then also on the other end, actively trying to play around the counter.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, counters are definitely are back in style with all the different good ones. There, Stern Scolding, Glorious Gale. Saruman's Trickery is actually way better than I thought it would be.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a little bit newer for... we usually have an Essence Scatter of some sort, like the Glorious Gale, but there's a lot more on top of that. So blue, I think, does... it's okay sitting there early, maybe playing a Pelgear Survivor early, and then basically just making sure you don't die, and then attrition.
Yep, for sure.
Speaking about colors, so I have had some changes over this past week of even stronger feelings, at least right now in the format, to what I felt week 1. So I felt black was the strongest color, and black is so deep. It has 8 of its commons have a higher win rate than any common in blue, white, or green.
Yeah.
8. And that's 8 of 19, so nearly 50%. Yeah. And you actually literally get to 52% of black's commons being a higher win rate than any single white and green common at all. So it's so deep that I've gone, I won't say to like hard forcing it, but I'm strongly leaning into black right now. I do think that will change eventually to be a little bit more taken, But even when it is taken by someone close to you, I drafted so the number two player in our draft was two away from me. You were sitting in between us.
Yeah.
And he also drafted
I played him
black.
last round, and he drafted black.
Yeah. So like clearly black can support a good amount of players. So
Yeah.
I tend to go.
And there was a third person in our 6-person pod who's like, I don't know if he splashed it or not, but he definitely had black because he played Smeagol, Helpful Guide. So it was more of a splash situation, but he definitely had it, right? So he played blue black green, right? So
like don't get me wrong, I'm not completely forcing it. Like I especially because I also just like to have the experience of playing with other colors to see how they work. So if black is not coming my way, I won't take it, but I am going to take black as an early pick before I start taking the other colors, because if I can stay that way, I'm going to have a strong deck in black.
Sure, yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, I agree with it. I also have not tried to force black as much because I am trying to get a little bit of experience with all the colors. Although I do regret it a lot when I don't actually say, I'll say, you know what? There's a really good uncommon or a really good rare here, but there's also a Claim the Precious in this deck or this pack. First pick, I'm going to take the really good uncommon or the really good rare, and then I regret later on because the color combo just doesn't end up working out or something. I was like, no, I should have just taken this Claim the Precious because it's reliable. Versus other colors which are more speculative and hey, great, a first pick Arwen is great, but you really need and we'll get into this I think a little bit. You really need the perfect deck to make that work. So, I mean, I've not found blue-black yet particularly strong, but I think I might have just gotten some bad luck the times that I've done it. I think we'll maybe go into a little later some of our blue-black controls, because you and I drafted fairly similar in a lot of ways blue-black control decks. You did much better than I did. But I think that part of that might just have been luck of the draw
I think
or things
variance
like that.
Definitely plays its role. I also got some pretty powerful bombs in mine, as we'll see, so that definitely played a role as well. Blue-black is good. I think it's... I don't like it as much as black-red. I don't like it as much, I think, as black-white even. But I'm definitely... I kind of put that next tier there. I think you definitely do, black-blue is always a control deck, I think. I don't think there is another version of this. But I do like, early removal, early counters, draw cards, get something big, and outdo your opponent with attrition. Yeah. I'd say red is also still high up. I still think it's the second best color. It has 4 commons above any blue common, but it's a bit harder to force because it's not quite as deep as as black. So I'm not as drafting with preferences into red. But I found that white and blue are underdrafted, so I'm often getting into, like we mentioned, black-white or black-blue. But I'm always happy to go into black-red mid-range, or even red-white aggro. I think that's quite a good deck, too.
Yeah, and I'll say, and we've got up the sort of rankings on the screen here of the different colors, and Quarrel's End is ranking a lot higher than I would have originally thought it. I still don't love the card, but it's clearly doing some work, right? It's rated equally right now with Smite the Deathless in terms of at a B rating. Obviously, I would gladly say that Smite the Deathless is much better, but it's clearly seeing play. It's ranked above a few others that I think are actually pretty good cards as well, like Relentless Rohirrim is on there. I think that's at a B-. Improvised Club, also decent removal, again at a B-. And so I'm kind of surprised that Quarrel's End is ending up playing about as well as it is. And I need to kind of give that card another look, I think.
Yeah, I saw it was specifically doing really well in blue-red.
I would imagine that, right?
It would be... I don't know where else, it's B- and Rakdos.
The same, yeah.
Yeah.
I imagine in Boros it's probably a little further down.
Yeah, I don't even see it here.
It's a C.
C, yeah.
Yeah. And then in Gruul it's probably further down.
Yeah, C+. C+,
yeah.
Yeah, part of that is those... no, I mean, red-white's good, though. I guess... in your control decks, I mean, they let you like drawing cards, you know,
Yeah.
so that's really what it is.
Well, and it's a free blocker too, right?
Yeah.
So you get that free blocker, and there's probably something you can get rid of in your hand, especially if you get it later and you're just ditching a land.
Yep.
So.
Yep. I'll mention. I guess we'll go over this when we talk through the drafts.
Yeah.
But I do think if you in blue black to have success, you really want to be drafting, Glorious Gale, the counters that we talked about. Birthday Escape is quite good in that deck, especially if you can pick up like a Gandalf. And Morgul Knife Wound is actually, I found decent, because I don't love Morgul Knife Wound in my aggro decks, like Black-Red aggro, for instance, because I basically would want to play it so my creature can't die, attack on in, and then they just chump block with it type of thing. Yeah. So I like that more as my like turn 2 play in a black-blue control deck where they have to decide if they want to keep on taking damage or sacrifice it. And
sure,
the -3 part
puts a timer on them, and it puts a timer on and makes it.
Yeah. So those type of things I think are useful for blue-black control to survive longer into the game.
Yeah, and it's another one of those cases, right, where that goes on with some of those 2 or 3 drop legendaries we talked about, like Arwen. You know, putting a Mortal Knife Wound on Arwen, they got to decide, right? Do they want to keep getting 1/1 counters every time they scry, or do they not want to lose 2 life? And that's a hard choice, actually, on turn 2, because you don't have enough information about how the game is going to unfold to necessarily, like, I think that in that position, I'd take the 2 life for at least a couple of turns, probably, unless I was hard pressed. And, that way, I might be able to eke out a few counters and really get some momentum going or something like that. So, yeah, that's a tough one. But, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, just the fact that it's a 0 power creature, though, for the most part, I end up sacrificing, but it is a decision for a lot of those synergy-related cards that you.
Yeah, or like some of the food ones, like a Peregrine Toque or something like that, that's going to give you additional food tokens. So, I can see, depending on what else is in your hand, if you feel like you can combo off it enough, you might be tempted to keep it, but it then puts you on a timer, and control decks really, really excel at that kind of thing, right?
I've also been moving into, whereas before I was soft avoiding green, I'm now basically hard avoiding green. And because it doesn't have as good of a win rate of anything. In fact, all the commons are lower than like 50% of the other commons in the set, like of other colors. It's hasn't been that bad of a color, or like this kind of color imbalance before in a set where one is just like this unplayable, and it's nearing that. Like, I don't ever want to say never play a color.
Sure.
But I'm as close to saying that as I ever have been.
Yeah.
I have avoided archetypes in the past, like Riveteers and Streets of Capenna, wasn't really a thing. But the overlap of colors, you'd still play all 5 colors in particular archetypes. So, what do you think about green?
No, I think I generally agree at this point, and I say this having gone, like 1 and 3 in a number of blue-green, combos, or blue-green-white or something like that. And, it can be really powerful if it all fits together, right? But doing so is really a matter of luck than anything else. It's not there's very little strategy involved in. I mean, obviously you have to take the cards, but if you can if you can manage to swing 2 copies of Arwen, the uncommon version of Elrond that whenever you put a creature in you scry. And a few other elves or things like that, plus things like Chance Met Elves. Like, you can build yourself a really powerhouse of a scry deck. However, it's really hard to do that, and if you can't pull that off, and you can only get like 1 copy of the Arwen plus a couple Chance Met Elves or something like that, it just doesn't amount to much.
Right.
And sure, if you draw the Arwen turn 2, you're off to the races if they can't remove it, but it's very, very luck based, and it's not skill based, and I think that's where we're really finding that green is suffering in this set. And I haven't seen a lot of green red, and I think it's honestly just because there are not a lot of good synergies there.
Yeah,
right? Like there are green cards with scry and there are blue cards with scry, and that plays well together. But there's not a lot of overlap between card types that would create a cool synergy between green and red, and I think that's why we're just not seeing a lot of those types of decks. I mean, you could do things like with Trample, right? There are obviously, trample in both and things like that, but it's hard to just build a deck around something like trample. So, it's weird because it's like, okay, yeah, you can theoretically play Rally at the Hornburg in a green-red deck, but why wouldn't you just play a green-white deck and have other things that can buff your humans in some way? So that's why I think maybe green is suffering a little bit.
Yeah.
Green-black can be good, right? There are certainly things like Shello, there are things like Old Man Willow, but all of those things can be splashed.
Exactly.
And so,
I will splash green still.
exactly.
Don't get me wrong. Like, yeah. That's
like
yeah.
all the good like things that you get from that can be splashed. So you can play Rakdos and then splash green, and all of a sudden, hey, Shelob, hey, Old Man Willow, things like that,
Right.
and there's no reason to main it, but yeah, that's I broadly agree, I think, but I mean, we'll have to kind of see how it goes.
I'm waiting for the format metagame to change where if enough people draft black, let's say half the table, 4 players draft black,
and somebody can put together a good green deck. Yeah,
exactly, because now they aren't getting all the removal either to kill your Arwins or whatever you need for your synergy. So if the removal gets limited, then I think those synergy strategies will come out of the woodwork.
Yeah.
So I don't think that this will stay a strategy of hard avoiding green for me for a long time. But for the next week or two, until I'm shown otherwise, I haven't been playing green other than to splash.
Yeah, and there's definitely good splashable green cards. And then, I'm still interested to see a good green-white deck pop off. I mean, I've seen some examples of it, but I think it's difficult to do. You need like a couple of Rosy Cottons and like things like that to really make it work. But I'm not sure it's like. Again, I think it's a little bit luck-based, right? It's just like the scry and the food and the token generation is all just a little luck-based, whereas it's actually much more reliable in, say, like red-white, right? Because you've got Rally at the Hornburg, you've got Protector of Gondor, you've got a number of other things, easy ways to create tokens. You've got Aemir, right, at Uncommon, who just creates tokens all by himself. And so, yeah, I think that's the hard part, right? It's you have to assemble one of these decks that can combo off. You need a lot of cards versus a lot of these other color combos that don't require that. I mean, they're better if you get it, but
right.
You can play red-white without any combos whatsoever.
Yeah. Well, that kind of brings us interesting to kind of the two paths we see in drafting. Like, there's a path of taking good cards and just sticking with that. And then there's the path also of, like, staying open and seeing what, good cards get passed your way, as well as maybe some of the synergies that are passed your way that you pick up on. Do you want to go over a little bit of how you play one strategy versus the other?
Yeah. So, I mean, and I think this is probably similar to the way a lot of people think, but my early rules of pack one, right, is pick the best card in the pack. Then if I don't see a good, clear winner there, or if it happens to overlap with the best in my color, then pick the best card in color, and then, everything after that, right?
Yeah.
And so, first or second pack, right, like this in-person draft we did, my first pick was a Voracious Fellbeast, because it's just an excellent card. I didn't end up playing black at all, but, do I wish I would have first picked something different? Probably, but with that kind of hindsight, so... best in pack, then best in color, then everything else. And then, pack 2 on, it kind of reverses. It's usually best in color, best in pack, then everything else. But there's still the opportunity, right? Like, if you see something splashable, right, I might take it. And this draft was actually an example of that. Although I did not take it highly, it got wheeled to me. I eventually took a Prince Imrahil and actually played it in my white-red deck, just to splash. And, in hindsight, I may not have wanted to do that. It may have been better to not take the Prince Imrahil and just stay true to red-white. But it was a good enough card, and I said, you know what, I've got room for it in the deck. I drafted a few other things like an Inherited Envelope and a Great Hall Citadel, so I had a couple of things in there that could help me get that mana. And so I ended up playing it. It didn't actually end up hitting the board in any of the games, but it's still so I'd say that generally early on, best in pack, then best in color, and then later on switching to best in color, then best in pack.
Yeah, and I think the point we made last week about the uncommons being where the power is, you will, if you try to pick something that's less powerful just because it's in a good color, I think you'll come to regret that. Like,
Yeah.
I guess Voracious Felbeast was a bad example because that's a great color.
Yeah,
and
it's a
just
great
really
card.
good
It's a great card. There was no way I was not going to take that.
Right,
Especially,
right.
I can't remember what the rare was, but it was absolute trash.
Yeah.
And so it was not a difficult decision looking at it. Although I did end up passing a Fearfire Foes in favor of the Voracious Felbeast, and obviously I much would have, given my colors, played the Fearfire Foes. But it was a tough choice, and I was like, well. Fearfire Foes was less likely to end the game than Voracious Felbeast is, so I took the Voracious Felbeast, because having your closer pick one is not a bad thing.
Yeah, that's an interesting choice. Pick one. That was your pack one, pick one, right? You
Yeah,
said
pack
between
one
those
pick
two?
one was Voracious Felbeast.
Yeah.
It was alternative was a Fearfire Foes.
Because I like Fearfire Foes better as a card, actually. I still love Voracious Felbeast, so
yeah.
that's. But Voracious Felbeast is in black, so that would be the winning thing to me. I don't know if that's what you went through.
It
when you
is.
had-
It's
yeah.
absolutely. But I was sitting next to you, and you were to my right, and so we were passing left. And then I was like, after I picked it, I was like, you know what? I'm probably not going to get a lot of black sitting next to Jeremy.
In your seat, knowing that, I would have picked the Fearfire Foes.
Yeah, probably. But I mean, it worked out fine, obviously. But still, yeah. I mean, so it can be tough, that first pick. But yeah, uncommons, I agree. The power's there. The good removal's often there. Or even at common, right? There's actually fairly few good rare removals. So
Yeah.
but yeah.
I do think that there's something to be said about not taking just good cards when there are other close to equal cards
Sure.
that
Yes.
will keep you open.
Yeah.
So a lot of your 2-mana multicolored cards
Yeah.
are quite powerful.
Yeah.
But I did not pick them right away. Like
Sure,
I had
yeah.
the Mauher, the black and a red 2/2 that had menace, and whenever you put a +1/+1 counter on something, you put another one. And I did not pick that right away because I didn't want to commit myself to being black-red. But when it became more clear that black and red is likely a thing, I did pick it highly. Now, granted, if there's nothing in the pack that you really want, I do think you'll pick the 2-mana
Sure.
uncommons over bad commons,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
even
yeah.
decent commons,
Yeah.
I should say. I probably wouldn't pick that over a really great common
Sure.
like Claim the Precious, or even like a Dunlin Crebain, or Spite the Deathless, or things
Yeah,
like that,
yeah, for
or
sure.
Rally. But I would jump in if basically those cards were.
Yeah, no, and I had the opportunity to take Imrahil earlier, right? And I passed it, and he wheeled, and then I was like, on second pass, I was like, there's absolutely nothing else in here I want, so I'm going to take Imrahil.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily just take those really good uncommons if they're not going to fit in with your colors, just to take it. But again, I like kind of with the idea of I could splash it potentially. I kind of took him on the wheel just because I think my other option was like the 4-mana cost Orthanc, destroy artifact, or creatures can't block, or something like that.
Artifact or land.
Yeah. And I was like, you know what? This is not particularly worth it. I'm not going to play this card. I might play Imrahil. So
Yeah. No, that makes sense. There is something interesting to be said about green, and I mentioned this in my first impressions episode, very first day of the draft, where it seemed like green was, yes, poor, but where I do see its power is in fixing.
Yeah.
So it can help you play the rest of the good cards.
Many partings, things like that.
Yeah. So there is a strategy to also just taking good cards and letting your staying open be picking green so that you can fix for a lot of those cards. Now, again, you don't really want to be picking like the black-red Malheur early in that example because it's not quite powerful enough to be playing base green in that. And, and
you need a lot of
splashing for it.
fixing if you're basing green and then you're trying to actually play on turn 2 a black-red, right?
Right.
So,
but I would do some of my more expensive bombs,
Shello, things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Things that you can easily fix for by turn 6 or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are some other cards that you've liked to play in order to help with your mana and stay open?
I mean, in addition to Great Hall, obviously there's Inherited Envelope, which is not great, but I do think it has the bonus of the Ring Tempt, which actually can be something pretty good.
Yeah.
Just as a free bonus on it. It's not a terrible mono rock overall, especially because it taps for any color. Shire Terrace, obviously, as well. Same kind of deal. I don't love those as much as I like Great Hall, because Great Hall just is, there's not really a downside
Right.
to playing a Great Hall, as long as you don't need, as long as you didn't need like double white, right, and you only have a plains, and you're not casting a legendary, right. But for fixing for legendaries, it's great, just because as soon as the Great Hall hits, you've basically allowed yourself to play whatever legendary you want to play. So there's that. I mean, I will say, I'm always tempted in the back of my mind just to say screw it and try and play a 5-color legendary deck, right? Where I base green, I get things like many partings, maybe an Entish Restoration, like 5 Great Halls, and maybe 1 or 2 inherited envelopes or something, and then just be like, I'm gonna take every single one of these like 2/2 fairly powerful, or 2 cost, 3 cost, things that and find some way to make them play nice together, right? Like Imrahil and Rosie Cotton, and there's another one that generates tokens somehow. So just those kind of things, and they're wildly different colors, and I don't care because I can fix my mono whenever I need to.
Yeah.
Like maybe even grab a Wizard's Rockets or something in there to do it in an emergency. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have a feeling that probably wouldn't play very well, but I'm interested to see it tried.
Yeah, most formats will find a way to get something like that in there, and I do think that this matches the pattern of most formats, where right now in the metagame that won't work, simply because it's sort of, in a way, a fallback deck, right? I got a pile of good things that don't all fit together, and I need to find a way to fit it together with the fixing. And that's how you get the powers. You get access to all the powerful cards that not every deck can play.
Yeah.
The problem is right now, with mostly black and red, it seems open enough where you're going to come across a lot of decks, I think, that just have enough power in a straightforward, streamlined way that you're not going to compete, because you're going to be too inconsistent trying to do all that. But as people draft black and red more, I think specifically, I think that green will open up more, and all their decks will weaken, and you will have enough power from picking just any good card that you can play. Yeah. Sort of a thing.
Yeah, no.
Multicolored good stuff.
Yeah, multicolored good stuff. And I mean, there's certainly a lot of removal that you can make that work. Like, you wouldn't want things like Claim the Precious, but you could do Hobbit Sting, you could do Smite the Deathless. There are options, where you could do, or, if you're basing in green, you have things like Stew the Conies, or, Ents Fury, there you go. I'm blanking on names today for some reason, but Ents Fury, decent, it's not technically removal, but it can easily be used as removal. I mean, it is, I guess, because it does a fight, right? So, but yeah, I mean, so there are definitely opportunities for that as well, if you're basing in green, to get some good removal, even if you're not getting the Claim the Precious and things. So yeah, I think it could be good, but it would be this really razor's edge to balance on.
Yeah. You mentioned Inherited Envelope and the Tempting of the Ring. So Inherited Envelope is not one I played. It is one where if I have no other card I want to play, I will pick that, so that it sets me up for fixing in case later on I do find something I want to play.
Yeah.
So I'm not completely against playing it. I've just never found a good place to, and I don't really prioritize it. I'm not going to play it unless I really feel I have a good reason to. But it does bring up the topic of ring temps.
Yeah.
And while I still think ring temps aren't everything, I've waffled kind of all over. I thought, it wasn't that great, and then I thought it was even worse because it came up in less than half my decks, and now I'm starting to come back up on it a bit. Getting to that second ring tempt is really good to ditch whatever you don't need and draw what you do need. And I'd say it has come up in more than half the games. I don't think it's the end-all be-all,
Sure.
Some decks will just not even care about it, and many decks will not care about it. Most of the decks I've played have not, actually. But I do find myself now trying to fit on in cards that say Ring Tempt, so that I can at least get to that level 2.
Yeah.
And there are decks that I think, which are kind of more of your I think Red Blue has a version that's strong Ring Tempt, where you do want to get all the way to level 4.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about Ring Temp now?
Yeah, I think 2 is still the sweet spot for me. The looting is obviously great. It's easy enough to accomplish in most decks. I think just to have, if you've got 5, 6 sources of Ring Temp, you'll probably get to 2 a lot of the time. But the ability to loot, like especially when your opponent can't, or when you can deny your opponent that, it just adds so much card advantage. I'd be interested to see if, and there's no statistics on this on 17 lands or anything, but if you could see like the percentage of games won, when somebody gets to level 2 ring tempt and the opponent just doesn't.
Right.
I'd love to see the win rate of that stat somehow, because I do suspect it's pretty high. Right. I just for the sheer number of cards you're going to see. There's obviously also cards that combo off whenever you draw your second card. We talked about Imrahil. He's one, obviously. So there are definitely a lot of good ways. I will say, I played a red-white, another version of red-white on Arena a few days ago, and the deck trophied, so it was clearly good. But, I got to, in one game, pull off with Bilbo Retired Burglar because I splashed for blue just for Bilbo. And then I got to play him. He got level 1 ring temp when he entered the battlefield. Then I slipped on the ring for him. And then I got 3 more levels of ring temp off of just those 2 cards, because when he leaves, it tempts the slip on the ring, tempts. When he comes back, he tempts again. So he was automatically at level 4 ring temp, and he was basically unblockable, giving me a treasure token and losing my opponent 4 life every turn that he attacked. And if they don't have removal for that, they're basically dead.
Yeah,
so
Bilbo's great. I will say it's interesting that you splash for Bilbo. Like I don't think I would really be splashing for Bilbo at a 3 mana, but it worked out well.
Yeah, it worked out. Yeah. There were a couple of other cards. He wasn't the only card I splashed for. I can't remember. I think I might have had ManaTutor as well in there for like a late game play or something. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there were a couple of other cards that I did splash for, and it worked out pretty well.
I've come down on ManaTutor mostly because the win rate for ManaTutor is just meh on every deck.
Yeah,
it's like 55% or so.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's a good card with a 3 mana or 4 mana 3/3 flyer that effectively is vigilance and has upside on any kind of enter the battlefield type thing. Yeah. But it doesn't slot as well into any given deck, I think, is what it suffers from.
Yeah. But he played amazing in that deck though, because I had 2 copies of Bill the Pony. So Maneldoring Bill the Pony when Rosie Cotton's on the field. It's stupid, right? It ends up being just really stupid, and obviously that requires a lot of comboing, but it worked, right? And I agree with you. He's probably not usable in all situations, but if you can get a few of those LTB, ETB cards, he tends to play, I think, punch pretty well above his weight. Yeah. So,
talking about Bill the Pony and the ring, I actually got into a game. So the last 2 drafts I went 7-0, 7-2. And one of the 2 losses, both decks that I played were black-white, I believe, and I had to pick a ring bearer between Nazgul and Bill the Pony, and both are pretty good ring bearers, right? Bill the Pony because he can just go on through, and then Nazgul because it's Death Touch, so anything that does block it, especially with it, being pumped up, basically I could kill things that need to try to kill your ring bearer. So I just didn't want my ring bearer to die. And also for Bill the Pony, I only had 1 food left. Yeah. So I put it on Nazgul, but my Nazgul was already tempted a couple times and was fairly big Death Toucher. I didn't spread out my resources enough. I let them just kill Nazgul with a Claim the Precious, I think, and all I had left was a Bill the Pony that wasn't legendary. I needed to make Bill the Pony the ring bearer so that I had 3 or 4 lands in hand. I was flooded, so I could be cycling through all those lands. So just a point to note is sometimes you want to put your ring bearer on your worst creature to spread out your threats, because it's a threat once you're at level 2.
Yeah, and they want to block it if they can. And Bill the Pony is actually really hard to do that against, though, because you'd have to basically quadruple block him in a lot of cases to kill him. And if they decide to do that, right? Okay, we'll just sacrifice a food, and I'll gladly 3 or 4 for 1, a bunch of creatures if you really want to kill Bill.
What other creatures have you seen that wear the ring really well?
I love it on Dunlin Crebain, obviously. Just putting it on the flyer.
Yep.
Anytime you can give the ring bearer evasion is great, I think. I love it on Rohirrim, the one cost Rohirrim, the
Yeah.
Menace,
Yep.
right? Just because he's really hard to block with the ring. And your opponent generally isn't going to want to kill it, because if they kill it, you get another ring temp. So they're not going to want to waste 2 creatures blocking it and then also give you a ring temp. So I think it actually turns out really good. I actually played a game in our in-person draft today where I had that, and I think it's Rohirrim Lancer. It's not
The
Relentless.
4/3?
No, the
Oh,
1/1.
Rohirrim Lancer's the 1/1. Yeah.
Yeah, Rohirrim Lancer is the 1/1. And I put it on the Rohirrim Lancer, and then I also had a Haradrim Spearman out, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it was a 2/1 every turn, and it was still, he didn't want to block it, right? Because he was going to have to block it with 2 things, and it was going to be, it would die, but I'd immediately get a new ring bearer. So
Right.
so it wasn't. I think Rohirrim Lancer is actually a really good ring bearer. And again, the Crebain is good, and there's a lot of others as well. Bill the pony is good ring bearer.
Yeah, so actually talking about Rohirrim Lancer, I was surprised. So I'm not a huge fan of 1-mana 1/1s in general because they tend to limited not to be worth a card. Like, you spent that card, a 1/1 hitting you each turn is not that bad. But you're right on the ring bearer piece of this. Not only because not even the tempting you piece when it dies, which is a great piece, but him wearing the ring is great. It has a 60% win rate in Black Red, and I think that there's a tempt the ring version of Black Red that I haven't been playing as much. I've been playing more of the amass version of Black Red rather than a ring tempt version. Not that they're mutually exclusive or anything, but sometimes it does come down to, if you're picking cards that say amass, most of the time it doesn't also have a ring tempts you on it as well. In fact, I can't think of a card that does both. There probably is, but
There's got to be 1 or 2.
Yeah.
I just can't think of them off the top of my head.
But so if
some
I'm-
in blue maybe or something.
if I'm taking one, I'm not usually taking the other type of
Yeah.
thing, right? So, but I think I want to explore a little bit more of the ring tempt version with a 60% win rate in Black Red. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and you can see, I think, see both Haradrim Spearmaster and Rohirrim Lancer at a C+ right now in that, and I think that's about right at this point. Like they are honestly, I think, a good combo, because it makes, like, no one wants to double block a 2/1, right? Like just to kill it, and so I actually got a lot of use out of that. I think I did about 6 or 8 damage with that in one of those games, just because he didn't want to bother to double block it and lose 2 creatures, right? I'll say the interesting thing, right, is it makes it easier to block as a ring bearer if you pump it with Spearmaster, right? Because they can then choose to block it with a 2/2 or something like that.
Right.
But even then, the Menace really helps, right? Because they just can't. It makes it a lot harder. So yeah, it's an interesting thing I'm experimenting more and more with. But Rohirrim Lancer is a great ring bearer. So.
Yeah. Also in ring temps, I want to mention blue as well, because I think blue plays quite well with the ring temp mechanic, specifically Birthday Escape.
Yep.
I think that's it is the top blue common in blue. Yeah,
Yep.
B. It stands in a category of its own. And when we reviewed this, we said, I think we gave it like a C- type grade, and then we came on in saying, it is a 1-mana kind of like do nothing, but we both said, even though we're rating this low as like not a high pick, we think it will play better in the games because it's just so cheap.
Absolutely.
It essentially lets you filter through your
More or
deck
less
quicker.
A free ring tempt in a lot of
Free
cases.
ring tempt, yeah. And that has played out to be true. It's I still don't know if I'm taking that, say, over like Gloria Scale for my first blue card. Like, I feel I want to be more protected first with the Gloria Scale, but I'm definitely picking up Birthday Escape shortly thereafter once I pick up my other blue
100%
stuff.
agree. Yeah, and it's funny because I've since starting the drafting with this set a couple weeks ago now, the number of Birthday Escapes I see making it past third or fourth pick, very few.
Yeah.
And I think everybody's kind of realizing that it's a good card. Again, I don't know if it's better than Glorious Gale. Interestingly, you'll also note things like Deceive the Messenger at a B-. I'm not sure Deceive the Messenger's a B-.
I love Deceive the
Really?
Messenger, yeah. So I probably played this more than most people that in blue. It just works so well on defense, which is what I want to be doing in blue, because it's 1-mana 1/1 still, right?
Sure.
And it's a surprise 1/1, and it's a surprise that you get -3, -0. Whenever they attack into you, if they attack into you with like the 3/1 that when you sack the white one, when they sack, it completely just make a 1/1,
Kills
destroy
it, yeah.
target,
Kills it.
creature. So that type of thing I've liked a lot. It's also just a trick, like formats.
It's a good trick. Yeah, I mean, I'm a little higher on it now than I think I used to be, but I'm still not completely sold on it.
I'm not taking it over Birthday Escape or Glorious Scale. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm not taking over Pelagriger Survivor either.
Sure.
But I do think I'm taking it over Soothing of Smeagol, for instance.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't like Soothing. I'm surprised Soothing of Smeagol is up where it's at you in the blue. It's an unsummon. That's effectively what it is with a Ring Tempt, and I'm not sure I like it for 2 mana. But I'll play it every now and then.
Yeah.
So.
I'm still taking Luring Revealed almost like.
Oh yeah. Over all of that.
All of that.
Yeah.
In fact, just I'm taking it over all the other blue commons. Talking through the data here, I do want to mention about 17 lands of like how to view this data, because you are right, there are some times where like is Deceive the Messenger actually better than some of these, like Lord and Reveal, for instance. And I know some people go into the sets not wanting to view the 17 lands data because they want to form their own opinion. I think there is value for sure on getting first-hand experience and having your own opinion on things,
100%.
Drafting your way. I personally always look at the data, though, but note that I am very ready to discern when I don't think Birthday Escape should be picked over Glorious Scale, or when I think that, Deceive the Messenger is a lower pick than Lorien Revealed. Like, I having been a stats major helps a little bit understanding that sometimes that's not always the case. And then just strategy-wise, too, I'm willing to basically use the data to see when there's something that happens that I don't understand, like Quarrel's End was a good example. Like, clearly Quarrel's End is better than I thought it is.
Yeah.
Because I think I had this rated at like a D+ before.
Yeah.
So that I like to know that early on. And then I'm also able to pick out the cases where a card I think is performing poorer than it should if it were played right by people. And I do think cards, like I mentioned last week, like Tale of Tenuvial and Rise of the Witch King, I think those are both in like a C rating or something like that right now. And I do think they play more like B- when you have land cyclers and creatures that you really want to bring back to the battlefield.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think part of this is also the context of whatever your current deck looks like in terms of when you're picking things.
For sure.
Right? I think in our last episode, we talked about a choice of between Battle-Scarred Goblin or Mortar Muster. And, picking the Mortar Muster in terms of being able to play more swamps than mountains to get out things like Claim the Precious on turn 3 because of the double black, right? So there are definitely times where your choice could be informed, and what looks a little bit better for your deck could be informed by what else you might be playing, right? If you've got 3 copies of Claim the Precious, then you really do want to have 2 swamps on turn 3, right? So, in that case, if it's close, Battle-Scar Goblin might be a little bit better of a card overall, but Mortar Muster is going to fit better with your deck, right? Or, Mortar Muster versus, say, Rally at the Hornburg even, right?
Yeah.
Rally at the Hornburg, I would say, is generally certainly it's a better rated card, than a significantly better rated card than Mortar Muster. It's like an A- versus a B.
Yeah.
However, right, again, if you need that double black, turn 3, Mortar Muster might be a better pick for you.
Yeah. There's also sometimes the mana curve considerations as well. So one of the drafts that came up before, we had a choice, one of your drafts, between Relentless Rohirrim, which is another card that is higher than I think we both thought it would be as a 4-mana 4/3. It's rated in the B- right now. Again, just the
today,
extra. I did too.
Yeah.
And the extra Ring Tempt just pushes it over the edge into making it a good card. But while that's a better card, you were busy on the 4 drops already, and so picking the Morgul Knife Wound, which is quite a bit down here in like the C range, but that's a reasonable turn 2 play when you had no turn 2s,
Yeah.
or a low amount.
Yeah.
So that's another example.
I'll say I'm rarely suffering for 2 drops. I'm
You do,
cutting,
yeah.
I'm usually cutting 2 drops in my...
Yeah.
So, but that's a good point. And, even the Relentless Rohirrim versus the Olokai Crusher,
Yeah.
right? So Relentless Rohirrim, on paper, right, is in some ways a little bit worse as a 4-3 for 4 versus 4-4 for 4, 4-4 trample for 4, right? But if you're wanting that ring tempt, or if you're not playing a lot of goblins or orcs and you might want to block with the Relentless Rohirrim, right? There's certainly a case to be made that just even with the consistency of your deck, the Relentless Rohirrim might be the better pick. Or if you are playing a lot of goblins or orcs and you don't necessarily need the ring temp, then the Olokai Crusher might be better, right?
Yeah, I definitely think that there's what 17 lands can't tell you is in the context of what you have already drafted.
Yeah.
What's the best pick for you now?
Yeah.
So you are going to have to get your experience and intuition towards that type of a thing in order to draft well. Where I think 17 lands can help you is for what colors to draft with preferences. Like we've seen this graph before, but basically you can kind of do card performance and see where the different colors land in terms of power. I like to do average last seen at and game in hand win rate. And then just looking at, there's a lot of data to look at in here. So if we just put this to commons, because that'll be pretty good, like there's like no green here up above the win rate line, like that.
And almost exclusively black and red, right? There's some blue in there. There's a few whites.
White.
What's that big white in the middle there?
This thing right here?
Curious, yeah.
Protector of Gondor,
yeah. Great card, right? And so, at the top you're imagining that's Rally at the Hornburg, right? In that top center red slot, I'm guessing. That's got to be Rally at the Hornburg, yep.
This one's got to be Smite the Deathless.
Yep. So, which is below the line, actually, but interestingly.
But it's still the 6th best card in the...
Sure, yes, yeah.
Interestingly, it's picked very highly.
Smite the Deathless.
Yeah.
It's picked a little bit higher than it's actually theoretically worth, but it's still interesting, so.
Yeah, and sometimes I think that's a good consideration to make is, okay, Rally is higher win rate than Smite, but is Smite a better early pick anyway? I think it's an interesting question because... you might need, like, if you feel you need a certain amount of removal, and removal's a little harder to get for you, like, there could be a debate that not every single deck needs 2/1/1s with Rally. I do think in this set, every deck can use it. So that's why it's such a good high win rate. But there are cases where some sets don't care about the 2/1/1s as much, and they might just care about dealing 3 damage to something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that might be what people are thinking, like, in their heads, where they're picking Smite sooner. There's also then the question of, okay, if Rally's going later, and Smite is not, should I be picking Smite early just so I get that, and can let my late rallies?
I actually ran into that exact problem. I took a Rally at the Hornburg in a pack with Smite the Deathless, and I think I passed it to you.
Yeah.
You took the Smite the Deathless.
You kept me out of blue, man. I would have an awesome blue-black deck if I stayed in. I did not get it early on, but the rest of the draft I got nothing but blue.
But no, and I had that exact dilemma, and I took the Rally at the Hornburg because, like, I was thinking in my head, Rally's got a much higher win rate, but you could make the case, right? I didn't actually end up with any removal in my deck, and so not having removal, I probably should have taken the Smite the Deathless. Rally at the Hornburg did win me games though, so I'm not gonna complain.
I still think I'm taking Rally over Smite just because it is enough better. Like every deck can use it.
The win rate, it's like the 3rd best common listed or 2nd best common listed there. So.
There is a similar question of Claim the Precious versus Crebain is like topic that keeps on coming up. Curious to hear what you think first.
I mean, so if I see both in a pack early, I will early in the draft, like first pack, I will probably take Claim because good removal is hard to come by, much harder to come by than creatures, right? You can find creatures to fill out your mana curve. Will something be just as good as Crebain? No, because Crebain is really good, but there are only a finite number of removal spells, and so I will gladly play a even like a foray of orcs or something in place of a Dunland Crebain. It's not as good, obviously, but those kind of things you can get later, whereas the removal tends to get weeded out really early in the pack. So early on, I would probably take a claim. Later, pack 2, pack 3, I'd probably look at what I had, right? And if I needed removal, I'd take the removal. If I needed creatures, I'd take the creature. But I think that's kind of how I tend to look at it. Really, is obviously the bread motto, right? Removal is number 2 after bombs, and so I would probably tend to err on the side of taking the removal higher. But Crebain isn't a bomb, but it's kind of almost a bomb. Like it's really good. So it's hard. It's a hard choice.
Well, you don't need to take removal. It seems like with your red white deck that had basically no removal trophying, but
sure, yes, but
I'm joking.
That was just. I think there was a lot of luck involved in that, and I don't think it would repeat because there were definitely some games there. I lost one game in a match, and it was because I didn't have removal for my opponent's creatures, and they were big creatures, and at that point you can only chump block so many times.
Yeah.
So
I would be interested to kind of see I don't know, maybe if we have a little bit more time today, my deck against your deck for the draft stuff. I think you have a better deck because you got more powerful cards than I got, although I have good cards in the good colors, so it'd be interesting. But I am on picking claim early on first over Crebain just for the exact same reasons you said. But I do think Crebain is a better card ultimately. And yeah, so this one's tough for me. It's a really close call, but I think I'd take the removal first.
Yeah.
Honestly, even if it's just the ring temp that's on top of it,
it's good. Yeah, it's good.
Kind of draws me over. Although I think part of the reason I love Crebain is the wearing the ring on the 1/1 flyer too.
Yeah,
so
it's also very good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean it's a tough choice, but I think you can always find maybe a somewhat substandard creature to replace it. You can't find substandard removal like Haradrim Spearmaster, fine creature in a 3-drop slot in a black-red. It's not. Is it as good as Crebain? No, it's not, and it never will be. But would I play it and then gladly take a claim the precious if it meant that? Yeah, absolutely. So.
Yeah. We had a couple card pairings we want to talk about as well. Mortar and Muster, I've liked that a lot with the pairings of Nasty End or Lash of the Balrog or Improvised Club. Be thinking about those pairings. One thing that 17 Lands has not always told us is you can see the overall win rate. You can see the overall win rate in terms of particular decks and what color pairs. But I'd be curious to see what's the win rate when you already have card X in your pile, right? So the interaction effect. And I think at some point I'd like to download the data and run that through R and pull all the stats, kind of see.
That would be interesting.
But yeah, I think those pairings are particularly good with Mortar Muster and those other sacrifice a creature cards.
Sure, yeah, and one I really love, and I don't think it gets enough love, and I'd be interested to see where it actually rates on the limited grades, but Slip on the Ring. I've been playing this card more and more now. The ring temp on it is great, but there are just so many good cards with ETB effects in black-white or white-red. Things like East Farthing Farmer, Crebain, Bill the Pony, Grishnock. Yeah, it's down there at a D.
It's the last.
Right? It's the last white comment. And but yeah, I mean, like I was saying, Crebain, East Farthing Farmer, Bill the Pony, Grishnock, it's also just a really good anti-removal spell, right? Like when somebody's gonna claim your precious on you, or do Smite the Deathless or Improvised Club, it's no, I'll save 2 mana for that gladly. It also allows you to avoid things like aura removal, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about that. But just okay, you wanna put a Fog on the Barrow Downs, that's fine. End of your turn, nope, creature's back, and I get a ring temp.
Yeah, I think Slip on the Ring falls into that category of Like, yes, it's not like a bomb or anything. It's not
No,
amazing.
yeah, no.
But its stats are lower than they should be
Yeah.
if you're playing it with the right other pairings of cards.
Yes.
And so I think it gets knocked down because people are not playing it right. And I do think over the course of the format, when people see what they should be playing it with, it'll rise on up. Like, I would love that combined with, for instance, Voracious Fellbeast, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Slip on the Ring. We
uh,
didn't even talk about that one, but like, yeah, Slip on the Ring. Voracious Fellbeast is amazing, right?
Yeah. And there's a lot of white enter the battlefield specifically stuff too, and
yeah, like Protector of Gondor with the 1/1 creation. I've definitely used it on that. You know, East Farthing Farmer, right? So it comes into play. You get a food, and then you pump something.
Yeah.
Like the ability to do that at an instant speed, right?
Yep.
Like you play to build the pony, and then you play an East Farthing Farmer. You've got like 3 or 4 food tokens. Now Slip on the Ring is a +4/+4 to target creature, right? So there's a lot, right? There's a lot of good options for it, and I've definitely used it on things that my opponents wanted to kill.
Yeah.
And so I think it's going to move up there. I'm really surprised it's actually low. I'm really surprised it's below things like Nimble Hobbit and Now for Wrath, Now for Ruin, and Second Breakfast. Like, it's so much better than Second Breakfast.
Yeah, it is. I agree. I think it'll move on up. I have yet to play it myself, and that shows I don't see it as a great card, but honestly, I also have gotten less like enter the battlefield related stuff in white. My white decks have really been always paired with black and been a black-white attrition based deck. And usually I get a Voracious Fellbeast in there. Maybe I should throw a Slip on the Ring.
Yeah, like no, it's so like I can't talk enough about this card because I've been playing it more and more, and I don't understand how it is currently the least winningest common in white. But it does depend on having things to use it with. But even if it don't have things to use it with, it's great anti-removal. It's great. Like later in the game, I am happy to leave 2 lands open just to prevent someone. Interestingly, it's up there in green-white, right? And
well, it's still a D though.
Yes, but it's not the last, right?
Yeah.
But that's where it benefits from things like food tokens. It's pretty low in there. I'd be interested to see where it goes in Boros. It's still last, right?
Yeah, so basically it's only good really in... It goes up highest in Azorius. Yeah. And it was decent Selesnya.
Which is interesting because I'm not sure there's a lot of ETBs in blue.
Right. But I'm not sure what's going on there. We'd have to see like what other card that pairs well with, but...
Yeah, there's not a lot of good ETBs on blue. I mean, there's Greyhaven's Navigator, which scries, but I wouldn't really consider that particularly good. Willow Wind also scries, but yeah, I mean, there's really nothing. But yeah, I like it, and I think it's gonna get better over time. So.
Yep.
So I think you want to talk about land cyclers a bit. I know we've talked a little bit about them, but I think we can say more.
Yeah, so basically, I think a lot of people say Lorien Revealed is the most powerful land cycler. I disagree, and actually even as soon as I even talk about land cyclers, one of the guys we played against at the draft
paper draft,
also had to chime in immediately like, I don't think that's the best one. I was like, I totally agree. Yeah. But I think a lot of people are saying that it is. I like the Troll better.
Yep, 100%.
You agree as well?
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Troll is the best. I mean... If only because it is such a potential game-ending card, right? Like, you get it out there, 9 times out of 10, your opponent's not going to be able to block it, and if they can, you're going to trade really well for that. So it's, the cycling effect is the same as all the others, but, like, the actual card itself is really good. Lorien is very good. I like it.
Yeah, it's my second. Yeah.
I'm not sure if I put it second or third. I might put Oliphant above it, only because Oliphant is kind of another one of those potential game enders, right? Giving something else +2/+0 and trample really helps when you're just trying to close out a game.
Yep.
But Lorien can also help, right? Like 5 mana, draw 3 cards. That's good.
Yeah.
Right?
I've heard a lot of other people trashing Oliphant. I think they just haven't liked red as much and have done other things, or maybe the red that they were playing was not so much that type of a game.
Sure.
It was more controlling with dealing the damage. The 1 blue red deal damage equal to the number of instant sorceries in your graveyard to a creature, and then basically that tramples over. Yeah. But yeah, for me, I think Lorien Revealed is key enough into the decks for blue that I think it is second for me. Granted, if you did get a whole bunch of there's other draw like
Arwen's
Gift, for instance,
Gift
things
is
like
good.
that. But I have found these decks like do not really mind drawing a lot.
Sure.
So having a lot of draw cards is good. So for me, it's second, and then Oliphant, and then I think you have a gap, and then I think it's Eagles next for me, and then Generous Ent. Generous Ent is interesting because it helps you splash the green, and again, I think when I'm playing green, it's splashable. So don't be surprised in drafts, if you watch and then all of a sudden I take a random Generous Ent. Just stay open to splashing green.
Just to stay open with it.
Yeah.
And it can be good for that, right?
Yeah.
It's certainly a good, and it's not bad to have in hand, right? A 5/7 is great. It's going to block most things. And I'd be interested to see where it kind of falls on there. But.
I forget the exact. I'm interested to see. So I remember in a lot of decks, Generous Ent actually had come on up as showing as fairly winnable in
like a
non-green,
white black or something. Yeah.
So I don't remember exactly. Right here, Generous Ent. Yeah.
Right.
White black.
In white black. Yeah. That's
the only
funny.
green card. So things like that. And that happens on multiple times. I think Generous Ent,
Shelob and things like that. Yeah,
I think that's like a hidden splash card kind of thing. For your other powerful green cards.
For sure. Yeah.
So
definitely. Yeah, and I've definitely noticed these land cyclers are going earlier and earlier in picks. Today, even in paper, man, I got 1 Eagles.
Yeah, I got 1 Jewel.
And that's it. I mean, I didn't even see much more than that. I mean, there was a time where I had a really good pick. I think it was like Theoden, and I passed an Eagles. And I was like, well, I gotta take Theoden. But, I'm really, really hurting for cyclers, and I managed to get 1 Eagles, and it did win me a game, which is good. But, it's... Yeah, I mean, they're going earlier.
And
people are recognizing
that's hurt me. My win rate has not been suffering. I'm now in the high 60s at this point. I think I'm 68% or so. So I've been doing fine, but in the game earlier, for instance, again, I was mana screwed once and I was mana flooded another time.
Yeah.
And these cyclers just help prevent all that. So I wish I at least had 2. That's much better than the 1 that I got, and I would have taken 3. Early in the format, I would play decks of 4 to 5.
Yeah, and that's just not happening anymore.
Yeah, it's not happening.
People are taking them. So
yeah,
it's definitely the case.
We're going to end there. We are going to do a virtual draft review for our next episode. We're going to be covering our blue-black control decks because we have noticed, again, blue is coming up as a color that's more open, as well as just seeing how control plays on out. I think it's a very interesting view into these drafts. And so don't forget to like and subscribe so that you'll get also the notification bell to see when we post that draft review that will be next. And you can see kind of a lot of what we talked about here play out in real action in the draft picks, I think.
Yep.
So thanks again. See you next time.
See you next time.